Welcome to 365 Motivationals. This is your go-to channel for powerful insights, timeless wisdom, and transformative ideas to elevate your mindset and inspire daily growth. Together, we'll explore life-changing books, strategies, and principles that can empower you to achieve your goals and lead a fulfilled life. If you find value in this video, make sure to like it. It's a small action that makes a big difference by helping the content reach more people. Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments below. We love engaging with your insights and experiences. And don't forget to subscribe if you're new here. Join our growing community of motivated individuals who are transforming their lives one day at a time. Summary of Practicing Mental Influence by William Walker Atkinson. William Walker Atkinson's Practicing Mental Influence is a fascinating guide to understanding and mastering the art of influencing others through mental power. In this compelling work, Atkinson unpacks the principles behind the subtle yet impactful ways the mind can affect others, offering both theoretical insights and practical techniques. The book begins by explaining the concept of mental vibrations and how thoughts are transmitted as energy waves. Atkinson highlights the importance of focus, intention, and visualization in projecting mental influence effectively. He provides a detailed framework for developing one's mental faculties, including concentration exercises and techniques to cultivate strong willpower. Atkinson also explores the ethical implications of mental influence, stressing the importance of using this power responsibly and for positive purposes. He distinguishes between constructive mental influence, such as inspiring or motivating others, and manipulative practices that violate free will. The practical sections of the book delve into real-world applications, such as enhancing personal charisma, building rapport, and creating a magnetic presence. Atkinson's timeless insights empower readers to strengthen their inner confidence and channel their mental energy to achieve desired outcomes in relationships, business, and personal development. Practicing mental influence is more than a guide. It's a manual for unlocking the hidden potential of the mind. For those curious about the power of thoughts and their influence on the world, this book offers both enlightenment and actionable strategies to harness this remarkable ability.
Chapter 1. The Law of Vibration. Students of history find a continuous chain of reference to the mysterious influence of one human mind over that of others. In the earliest records, traditions and legends may be found giving reference to the general belief that it was possible for an individual to exert some weird, uncanny power over the minds of other persons, which would influence the latter for good or evil. And more than this, the student will find an accompanying belief that certain individuals are possessed of some mental power which bends even things and circumstances to its might. Way back in the dim past of man's history on this planet, this belief existed, and it has steadily persisted in spite of the strenuous opposition of material science, even unto the present day. The years have not affected the belief, and in these dawning days of the 20th century, it has taken on a new strength and vitality, for its adherents have boldly stepped to the front, and confronting the doubting materialistic thinkers, have claimed the name of science for this truth, and have insisted that it be taken, once and for all, from the category of superstition, credulity, and ignorant phantasm. Were it not pitiable, it would be amusing to glance at the presumptuous, complacent, smug, self-satisfied position of the materialistic school of thinkers, who would brush aside as a foolish delusion that which many of the wisest men of a past age have accepted and taught as the truth. The modern know-it-alls would sneer contemptuously at facts that are known to be of actual occurrence in the daily lives of thousands of intelligent people, and which the experience of humankind has demonstrated for many centuries, in all lands and all races. The trouble lies in the dogmatic assumption of the materialistic school that what is known as mind is merely some peculiar action of the material brain, some writers even holding that the brain secretes thought, just as the liver secretes bile. They refuse to see that the operation of mind is a manifestation of energy known as electricity, magnetism, light, heat, gravitation, cohesion, etc. Because mental energy does not register the vibrations of these lower forms of energy, they conclude that the higher mental energy does not exist. Having formulated a theory to suit their materialistic conceptions, they try to ignore all facts not consistent with their theory. If they find a fact that will not squeeze into their narrow theory well, so much the worse for the fact, as a writer has said, and they promptly ignore or dispute it. As a matter of truth, the investigator is not compelled to resort to metaphysical explanations to account for the phenomena of mental influence. The very facts of physical science itself, if rightly interpreted, will give the clue to the mystery and will point the steps of the honest investigator toward the path where he may find the solution of the perplexing riddle. Although we know that the real solution lies in the metaphysical realm, still even physical science will corroborate the facts of its metaphysical sister science, and instead of contradicting the latter, will actually go far toward furnishing analogous facts and principles basis for a theory of metaphysical facts. The student will see at once that so far as physical science is concerned, it must begin at the phenomenon of thought transference. For in that phase of the subject may be found an elementary principle in evidence in many other forms of phenomena. We have given many instances of thought transference in the two preceding volumes of this series, entitled Mind Reading and Psychomancy, respectively, and so we need not repeat the same in this place. The main fact is that thought transference does exist and may be accounted for upon purely scientific grounds without calling in the truths of metaphysical thought. We know that this is a strong statement and a positive assertion, but we also know that the same may be demonstrated. Let us consider this phase of the subject. In the first place, physical science teaches that underlying all forms, degrees, and apparent differences in matter and energy, there is to be found a manifestation of some elementary energy, which manifests in what is known as vibrations. Everything in the material world is in vibration, ever manifesting a high degree of motion. Without vibration, there would be no such thing as a material universe. From the electronic corpuscles which science teaches compose the atom, up through the atom and molecule, until the most complex forms of matter are manifested, there is the ever-present vibration. And through all forms of energy, light, heat, electricity, magnetism, and the rest, vibration is also ever-present. In fact, physical science itself teaches that not only is vibration the basic force underlying other forces and the various forms of matter, but also that the apparent differences between the various forms of matter and also between the various forms of energy are caused simply and solely by the varying degrees of vibration manifested. Just as the difference between the lowest tone that can be distinguished by the ear of man and the highest note that can be distinguished by the same organ of sense is merely a difference between the rate of vibration, just as is the difference between the dull red color at one end of the spectrum and the violet at the other end, with the intervening colors known as indigo, blue-green, yellow, and orange, with all the combinations of shades arising from them, just as the difference between the greatest degree of cold known to science and the greatest degree of heat that can be conceived of, just as these great differences due solely and wholly to varying rates of vibration, so is the difference between and all forms of matter or force simply a matter of the rate of vibration. In short, all material and physical things are simply manifestations of some infinite and eternal energy from which all things proceed, their differences resulting merely from the different degree of vibration being manifested in them. Remember that this is not vague philosophy or airy metaphysics or spiritualistic vagaries, to quote from the materialistic writers, but facts claimed and admitted by the greatest physical scientists of the age, as a reference to their lectures and textbooks will prove to anyone. And more than this, any intelligent physical scientist will tell you that science has every reason to believe that there are great fields of energy and force, the vibrations of which are far too high for even the delicate instruments of science to record, but which nevertheless exist and manifest effects. It was only the other day that science was able to catch the X-rays and other forms of high radioactivity, and yet these rays and forces had always existed. And tomorrow, science will perfect instruments capable of registering still higher forms of energy. Some scientist will perfect an instrument capable of registering and recording the subtle vibrations of thought. And perhaps in time, someone will perfect that instrument so that it will not only record such thought vibrations and waves, but, like the phonograph, it will be able to reproduce and send forth similar vibrations so that others may feel the thoughts, just as they now hear the sounds from the phonograph. Such a prediction is no more wonderful than would have been the prediction of the telephone, the phonograph, the wireless telegraph, and sundry other discoveries and inventions 100 years ago. Did you ever think that there are colors that the eye cannot see, but which delicate instruments clearly register? In fact, the rays of light which sunburn the face and which register on the photographic plate are not visible to the eye. The eye sees the lower rays, but only instruments adapted for the purpose detect the higher ones. Your eye cannot see the X-ray as it passes through the room, but the plate will catch it, and its light may make a photograph. The rays of light visible to the eyes are only the lower ones. The higher ones are far beyond the power of the eye to record, and beyond even the range of the most delicate instrument, there exist rays and waves of light of such high vibratory rate as to defy even its power to record. Did you ever know that there are sounds unheard by human ears that the microphone will catch and magnify? Scientific imagination dreams of instruments that will catch the songs of the mite, like insects, and magnify them until they can be distinguished. There are waves of electricity that may pass through your body, unperceived by you, and yet powerful enough to run light electric lights. Listen to the words of certain eminent scientists. Professor Elisha Gary, a celebrated scientist and teacher, has said, "There is much food for speculation in the thought that there exists sound waves that no human ear can hear, and color waves of light that no eye can see. The long, dark, soundless space between 40,000 and 400,000 vibrations per second, and the infinity of range beyond 700,000 vibrations per second, where light ceases in the universe of motion, makes it possible to indulge in speculation." Professor Williams, the well-known scientific writer, has said, "There is no gradation between the most rapid undulations or trembling that produces our sensations of sound and the slowest of those which give rise to our sensations of gentlest warmth. There is a huge gap between them, wide enough to include another world of motion, all lying between our world of sound and our world of heat and light. And there is no good reason whatever for supposing that matter is incapable of such intermediate activity, or that such activity may not give rise to intermediate sensations, provided that there are organs for taking up and sensitizing their movements." And so you see that in the scientific theory of vibrations, there may be found plenty of room for a scientific explanation of all that is claimed by adherents of the truth of mental influence, without getting out of the region of physical science, and without invading the plane of metaphysics. And there are many more proofs from the same source, which we may touch upon as we proceed. There is but one truth, and it manifests on all planes, the spiritual, the mental, and the physical, and manifestations agree and coincide. So no mentalist need fear the test of physical science, for each plane will bear out the facts and phenomena of the ones below or above it. The three are but varying phases of one. In this little work, we shall hug close to the plane of physical science, because by so doing we will be able to make the subject much clearer to many than if we had attempted to express the teaching in metaphysical terms. There is no contradiction in the end. Each bit of truth must dovetail into every other bit, for all are parts of the whole. Chapter 2. Thought Waves. In our last chapter, we have seen that vibration was to be found underlying all manifestations of energy and all forms of matter. We also quoted two distinguished scientists whose words showed that there were fields of vibratory energy not filled by any known forms of energy, the inference being that inasmuch as there are no gaps in nature's processes, these unknown fields must be occupied by certain forms of energy not known as yet to physical science. The teachings of the occultists of all lands and ages, as also those of modern mental science, are to the effect that the mind, in its manifestation of thought in the brain, generates a form of energy of intensely high vibration, which energy may be, and is, projected in vibratory waves from the brains of other persons within its field of influence. All students of mental influence have noticed the close resemblance that is manifested between the phenomena of electrical and magnetic energy on the one hand and the phenomena of mental energy on the other. So close is the analogy that one may take the proven facts of science relating to electrical and magnetic phenomena and confidently proceed with the certainty of finding a strikingly close correspondence in the field of mental phenomena. And the recognition of this fact is helping the workers in the mental field group to gather the varied phenomena that come under their notice and to work out the theory and practice of mental influence. In the first place, it is now a fact well known and accepted by investigators that the generation of thought and the manifestation of mental states occasions a burning up of brain matter and the consequent production of a form of energy of high vibratory power. Physiologists recognize this fact, and the textbooks make reference to it. Experiments have shown that the temperature of the brain is increased in accordance with the intensity of feeling and thought, and that there is undoubtedly a generation of energy and a consumption of brain matter which bears a very close resemblance to the process of the generation of electrical energy. And this being conceded, it follows that this energy, once released, must be emanated or sent forth from the brain in the manner akin to the emanation of other known forms of energy, i.e., in the form of waves of vibratory force. Light and heat travel in this way. So do electricity and magnetism. So do the forces of radioactivity. And the investigators of mental influence have demonstrated by their experiments that there is such a thing as thought induction, and many other phases of manifestation similar to that exhibited by electricity and magnetism. Flammarion, the well-known and eminent French scientist, has said on the subject. We sum up, therefore, our preceding observations by the conclusion that one mind can act at a distance upon another without the habitual medium of words or any other visible means of communication. It appears to us altogether unreasonable to reject this conclusion if we accept the facts. The conclusion will be abundantly demonstrated. There is nothing unscientific, nothing romantic in admitting that an idea can influence a brain from a distance. The action of one human being upon another from a distance is a scientific fact. It is as certain as the existence of Paris, of Napoleon, of oxygen, or of Sirius. The same authority also states, there can be no doubt that our physical force creates a movement in the ether which transmits itself afar like all movements in the ether, becomes perceptible to brains in harmony with our own. The transformation of a psychic action into an ethereal movement, and the reverse, may be analogous to what takes place on a telephone, where the receptive plate, which is identical with the plate at the other end, reconstructs the sonorous movement transmitted, not by means of sound, but by electricity. But these are only comparisons. When a thought or feeling is generated in the mind or brain of a person, the energy generated flows forth from the brain of the person in the form of waves of mental energy, spreading from the immediate neighborhood of the thinker to a distance proportioned to the strength of the thought or feeling. These thought waves have the property of awakening similar vibrations in the minds of other persons coming within their field of force, according to the laws of mental influence, which law shall be explained in the next chapter. As we proceed with our consideration of the subject of mental influence, in the succeeding chapters we shall see the many and varied forms of 1. Manifestation of thought waves. At this point, we shall merely view the phenomena in a general way. Thought waves are manifested in a variety of forms and phases. Some are the waves emanated from the minds of all thinkers, unconsciously and without purpose, and usually without much force. Others are sent forth with great force and travel far, manifesting a degree of influence commensurate with the force with which they are projected. Others are directed purposely towards certain individuals or places, and travel along rapidly in a straight line to the point which they have been directed or aimed. Others are sent forth with great strength and power, but instead of being directed toward any particular person or place, are designed to sweep around in great whirlpools of energy, affecting all who happen to fall within their field force. you will readily understand that there is a great difference between thought waves sent forth idly and unconsciously, and without knowledge of the underlying laws of mental influence, and those projected with a full knowledge of the laws governing the phenomena and urged on and directed by a powerful will of the sender. The force is the same, but the degree of its power and the measure of its effects are determined by the conditions of its sending force. The vibratory force of these thought waves does not cease with the sending forth of the wave, but persists for a long time afterward. Just as heat in a room persists long after the fire in the stove has been extinguished, just as the perfume of the flower exists in a room long after the flower has been removed, just as a ray of light travels through space for millions of miles, and for centuries after the star itself has been blotted out of existence, just as any and all forms of vibratory energy persist in manifesting after the initial impulse has been withdrawn, so do the vibrations of thought continue long after the thought, yes, long after the brain which sent them forth has passed into dust. There are many places today filled with the thought vibrations of minds long since passed outside of the body. There are many places filled with the strong vibrations of tragedies long since enacted there. Every place has an atmosphere of its own, arising from the thought vibrations set in motion by the various persons who have inhabited or occupied them. Every city has its own mental atmosphere, which has an effect upon persons moving into them. Some are lively, some dull, some progressive, some old fogyish, some moral, some immoral, the result of the character of the early settlers and leading spirits of the places. The atmosphere affects persons moving into these towns and either sinks to the general level or else, if strong enough, help to change the mental tone of the place. Sometimes a change in conditions brings a large influx of new people to the town, and the mental waves of the newcomers tend to bring about a marked change in the local mental atmosphere. These facts have been noted by many observing people who were, perhaps, not familiar with the laws and principles underlying the phenomena. Many have, of course, noticed the differing atmosphere of stores, offices, and other places of business. Some of such places give one an air of confidence and trust. Others create a feeling of suspicion and mistrust. Some convey an impression of active, wide-awake management, while others impress one as being behind the times and suffering from lack of alert, active management. Did you ever stop to think that these different atmospheres were caused by the prevailing mental attitudes of those in charge of the places? The managers of business places send forth thought waves of their own, and their employees naturally falling into the pace set for them, sending forth similar vibrations, and before long the whole place is vibrating on a certain scale. Let a change in the management occur, and see what a change soon manifests itself. Did you ever notice the mental atmospheres of the houses you happen to visit? You may experience and recognize all of the varying notes in the mental scale of their occupants. From some thresholds, harmony manifests itself, while others breathe in harmony as soon as you step over the threshold. Some radiate mental warmth, while others seem as cold as an iceberg. Think for a moment and recall the various houses or places you visit and see how the mental vibrations of the inmates manifest themselves to a visitor. The low quarters of our cities, the dens of vice and haunts of dissipation, vibrate with the character of thought and feeling of those inhabiting them, and the weak-willed visitor is thus tempted. And in the same way, certain places are filled with strong, helpful, elevating vibrations, which tend to lift up and elevate those coming within their circle of influence. Thoughts and feelings are contagious by reason of the law of vibration and mental induction. When this law is understood, the individual is enabled to protect and improve himself. Such knowledge brings strength. Chapter 3. Mental Induction. As we stated in the preceding chapter, the phenomena of mental influence bears a striking analogy to that of the electrical or magnetic energy. Not only is this so in the phase of wave motion and transmission, but also in the phase of induction, as we shall see presently. In physical science, the term induction is used to indicate that quality in a manifestation of energy which tends to reproduce in a second object the vibrations manifesting in the first object, without direct contact between the two bodies. A magnet will induce magnetism in another object removed from its space. An electrified object will tend to produce similar vibrations in another object by induction over great spaces. Heat waves travel along the ether and tend to produce heat vibrations in objects far removed, notably in the case of the sun and the earth. Even sound waves will affect other objects in this way, as in the well-known instance of the glass or vase singing in response to the musical note sounded afar off. In fact, we see and hear by processes similar to those described. And in this same manner that thought waves carry the vibrations of the mind, sending them forth to great distances, or lesser ones, tending to set up similar vibrations in the middle of other persons within their field force. Thus, a person feeling a strong degree of anger will pour forth waves of that degree of mental vibration, which, coming in contact with the brains of other persons, tend to set up a similar feelings or emotions, and thus cause the person to feel cross, or peevish, or even to manifest a similar angry state of mind. We all know how easily a fight is started by a very angry person in a room sending forth violent vibrations. One has but to remember the instances of mob violence to see how easily the contagion of hate and anger spread among people who allow themselves to be influenced. And not only is this true of undesirable emotions and feelings, but also of desirable ones. The influence of a good man who happens to be strong mentally spreads among those around him, influencing in them for good. Orators, actors, preachers, and teachers send forth strong within toll currents, which tend to produce mental conditions on the part of their mind. Hearers corresponding to the feeling held by the mind of the speaker. When you remember how this speaker swayed your feelings, or how that actor made you weep with pity, shiver with fear, or laugh with joy, you will see how mental induction acts. But not only is this true when we are in the actual presence of the person sending out the thought waves, but it is equally true that we are influenced by persons far removed from us in space, often without their knowledge or intent, although sometimes, in the case of one who understands the principle most, with full knowledge and intent. The ether with which space is filled carries these thought waves in all directions, and the surface of the earth, particularly in the densely occupied portions, is filled with these waves. These waves, carrying the mental vibrations, coming in contact with each other, tend to set up combinations on one hand, or else neutralize each other on the other hand. That is to say, if two sets of waves of a similar nature meet, there is likely to be a combination formed between them, just as between two chemicals having an affinity for each other. In this way, the mental atmosphere of places, towns, houses, etc. is formed. On the other hand, if currents of opposing vibrations came in contact with each other, there will be manifested a conflict between the two, in which each will lose in proportion to its weakness, and the result will be either a neutralization of both or else a combination having vibrations of an average rate. For instance, if two currents of mental energy meet, one being a thought of love and the other hate, they will neutralize each other if they are equal, or if one is stronger than the other, it will persist but robbed of much of its strength. If it were not for this neutralizing effect, we would be largely at the mercy of stray currents of thought. Nature protects us in this way, and also by rendering us immune to a considerable extent. But nevertheless, we are affected by these waves to a considerable extent, unless we have learned to throw them off by knowledge of the laws and an enforcement of them by practice. We all know how great waves of feeling spread over the town, city, or country, sweeping people off their balance. Great waves of political enthusiasm, or war spirits, or prejudice for or against certain people or groups of people sweep over places and cause men to act in a manner that they will afterward regret when they come to themselves and consider their acts in cold blood. Demagogues will sway them, or magnetic leaders who wish to gain their votes or patronage, and they will be led into acts of mob violence or similar atrocities by yielding to these waves of contagious thought. On the other hand, we all know how great waves of religious feeling sweep over a community upon the occasion of some great revival, excitement, or fervor. The effect of these thought waves, so far as the power of induction is concerned, of course, depends very materially upon the strength of the thought or feeling being manifested in the mind, sending them forth. The majority of persons put but little force into the mental manifestations, but here and there is to be found a thinker whose thought waves are practically a stream of living will, and which, of course, have a very strong inductive effect upon the minds of others with whom the waves come in contact. But it likewise follows that a number of persons thinking along the same lines will produce a great volume of power by a combination of their thought currents into great streams of mental force. Then again, there is another feature of the case that we must not lose sight of, and that is the attraction between minds, by virtue of which one draws to himself the thought waves of others whose thoughts are in accord with his own. The contrary is true, for there is repulsion between the minds of persons and the thought waves of others whose thoughts are not in accord with his own. The contrary is true, for there is repulsions between the minds of persons and the thought waves of others antagonistic to their thoughts. To quote a well-worn and much-used expression to illustrate this truth, like attracts like, and birds of a feather flock together. There is ever in operation this marvelous law of attraction and repulsion of mental energy. Persons allowing their thoughts to run along certain lines and permitting the feelings to be expressed in certain ways draw to themselves the thought waves and mental influences of others keyed to the same mental keynote, and likewise they repel the waves and influences of an opposing nature. This is an important fact to remember in one's everyday life. Good attracts good and repels evil. Evil attracts evil and repels good. The predominant mental attitude serves to attract similar influences and to repel the opposing ones. Therefore, watch carefully the character and nature of your thoughts, cultivate the desirable ones, and repress the undesirable ones. Verily, as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. Some thought waves sent forth with but little strength travel slowly and do not proceed very far from their place of emanation, but creep along like some smoke or fog, lazily and yielding. Other thoughts charged with a greater intensity of desire or will dart forth vigorously like an electric spark, and often travel great distances. The weak thought waves do not last a very long time, but fade away or become neutralized or dissipated by stronger forces. But the strong thoughts persist for a long time, retaining much of their vitality and energy. In the same manner, the thought waves of a person will continue to vibrate around him wherever he goes, and those coming in contact with him will be impressed by the character of his vibrations in this way. Some men send forth gloomy vibrations in this way. Some men send forth gloomy vibrations, which you feel when you come in contact with them. Others radiate good cheer, courage, and happiness, which conditions are induced in those with whom they come in contact. Many people will manifest these qualities so strongly that one can notice the effect the moment such persons enter a room. They carry their atmosphere with them, and the same is induced in the minds of others around them. In the same way, some people carry with them vibrations of willpower and masterfulness that beat upon the minds of others, making them feel the power of such persons and conquering their own willpower and changing their desires. Others manifest a strong power of fascination or attraction in a similar manner which tends to draw others to them and to their desires and wishes. Not only does this principle operate in the phase of general mental atmospheres, but also in the phase of direct personal influence. All forms of mental influence operate along the lines of mental induction, as herein described. The principle is the same in all cases and instances, although the manner of operation varies according to the particular phase of the phenomena manifested. Remember this as we proceed, and you will be able to understand the subject much better. Chapter 4. Mental Concentration. The two principal factors in the manifestation of mental influence, in all of its forms, are what are known as 1. Concentration, and 2. Mental imagining. The first of these factors shall be considered in this chapter, the succeeding chapter taking up the consideration of the second. Concentration is a word derived from two Latin words, i.e., con, a prefix meaning to, and centrum, meaning center, or fixed central point. The two words combined mean, literally, to bring to a common point, to focus, etc. Thus, the word concentration is seen to mean literally the act or state of bringing to a fixed point or focus. Borrowing an analogous illustration from physical science, we readily see that the highest forms of energy, force, or power are manifested by bringing the force to a focus, center, or common point, thereby directing to that point the entire energy employed, instead of allowing it to become dissipated over a larger area. The electricity generated by a battery or dynamo, if allowed to diffuse itself over a large surface, manifests but a small degree of the power that may be obtained from it by compelling it to discharge itself from a small point of focus. The same is true regarding the power of steam, which manifests great power by being forced to discharge itself through a small point or opening instead of being permitted to spread itself widely in the air. The same law applies to gunpowder, which manifests force by its gases being compelled to escape through the small gun barrel instead of spreading in all directions, which it would do if unconfined. Another familiar example is that of the sun glass, or burning glass, which brings the rays of the sun to a common point or focus, greatly intensifying the heat and light by reason thereof. The occult masters have ever impressed upon their pupils the importance and necessity of acquiring the power of mental concentration, and all trained and developed occultists have practiced and persevered toward this end, the result being that some of them attained almost miraculous mental powers and influence. All occult phenomena are caused in this way, and all occult power depends upon it. Therefore, the student of mental influence should devote much thought, time, and practice to this most important branch of the subject. It is a fact known to all students of mental phenomena that very few persons possess more than a very small degree of concentration. They allow their mental forces to become scattered and dissipated in all directions and obtain little or no results from the same. In the degree that a man is able to concentrate, so is he able to manifest mental power. A man's power of mental concentration is to a great extent his measure of greatness. Mental concentration, in practice, consists of focusing the mind upon a given subject or object firmly and fixedly, and then holding it there for a certain time, fully intent upon its object, and not allowing itself to be diverted or attracted from its object. It likewise consists in the correlative power of then detaching the mind from that subject or object, and either allowing it to rest, or else focusing it upon another object. In other words, it either gives undivided attention or else inhibits or shuts off attention from the given subject or object. To the reader who has had no experience along the lines of mental concentration, it may seem like a very easy mental influence task to focus the mind upon a subject and then hold it there firmly and fixedly. But a little practice will undeceive such a person and will bring him to a realizing sense of the difficulty of the task. The mind is a very restless thing, and its tendency is to dance from one thing to another, darting here and there, soon tiring of continued attention, and like a spoiled child, seeking a new object upon which to exercise itself. On the other hand, many people allow their minds to concentrate, involuntarily, upon whatever may strike their fancy, and, forgetting everything else, they give themselves up to the object attracting their attention for the moment, often neglecting duties and important interests, and becoming daydreamers instead of firm thinkers. This involuntary concentration is a thing to be avoided, for it is the allowing of the attention to escape the control of the will. The mental concentration of the occultists is a very different thing, and is solely in control of the will, being applied when desirable and taken off or inhibited when undesirable. The trained occultist will concentrate upon a subject or object with a wonderful intensity, seemingly completely absorbed in the subject or object before him and oblivious to all else in the world. And yet, the task accomplished, or the given time expired, he will detach his mind from the object and will be perfectly fresh, watchful, and wide awake to the next matter before him. There is a difference in being controlled by involuntary attention, which is a species of self-hypnotizing, and the control of the attention, which is an evidence of mastery. The secret of mental concentration lies in the control of the attention, and the control of the attention lies in the exercise of the will. A celebrated French psychologist has well said, The authority is subject to the superior authority of the ego. I yield it or I withhold it as I please. I direct it in turn to several points. I concentrate it upon each point as long as my will can stand the effort. Sully says, attention may be roughly defined as the active self-direction of the mind to any object which presents itself at the moment. All of the occult authorities begin teaching their pupils attention as the first step toward mental concentration. They instruct the pupil to examine some familiar object and endeavor to see as many details as possible in the object. Then, after hearing the pupil's report, the master sends him back to the task, bidding him seek for new details, and so on, until at last the pupil has discovered about all concerning the object that can be discovered. The next day, a new object is given to him, and the process is repeated. First, simple objects are given, and then more complex ones, until at last objects of great complexity are easily mastered. In this way, not only is the power of close observation highly developed, but also the faculty of attention becomes so highly strengthened that the pupil is able to exert the greatest amount of mental concentration with scarcely the consciousness of effort. And such a person then becomes a very giant in the manifestation of mental influence. For he is able to mold his mind one-pointed, as the Orientals describe it, until he has focused and directed a mighty degree of mental influence toward the desired object. Among the practices imposed upon their pupils by occult masters may be named mathematics, drawing, analysis, etc. You will readily see why this is. To begin with, mathematics requires the undivided attention of the student. Unless he concentrates upon his examples, he will not be able to work out their solution. And according to the principle in nature that practice makes perfect, and that exercise develops power, the practice of the mind along lines requiring voluntary attention and mental concentration will inevitably result in the acquirement of the mental control and power, which renders possible the strongest manifestation of mental influence. The person who uses mental influence must certainly possess the power of focusing the force to a common point in order to manifest the greatest amount of power and influence. And that faculty of focusing results from the training of the mind along the lines of concentration, and concentration arises from the mastery of voluntary attention. So there you have the whole matter in a nutshell. So your first step toward acquiring mental influence should be to cultivate voluntary attention. We might fill page after page with exercises designed to strengthen your faculty of voluntary attention, but what would be the use? The best plan is to set you to work to find something upon which to concentrate, for the very search will develop attention. Look around you for some object to study in detail. Then concentrate your attention upon it until you have seen all there is about it to be seen. Then take up another object and pursue the practice further. Take a page, this page if you will, and count the number of words on it. Then see how many words are required to fill each line on an average. Then see how many letters there are in each word in each line on the whole page. Then go over the page and see if any words are misspelled, or if any of the letters are imperfect, etc. In short, get acquainted with this page until you know all about it. Then take up another page, and after studying it in the same way, compare the two, and so on. Of course, this will be very dry and tedious unless you take an interest in it, and remembering just what the exercise is designed for may arouse this interest. After practicing this way for a short time each day, you will begin to find that you are able to bestow greater attention upon objects upon which you are trying to manifest mental influence. You are developing concentration,